The Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper. And now, Coach Bill Clark.
Welcome into another edition of the Bill Clark Show. Coach Bill Clark Show, brought to you by Buffalo Rock and Dr. Pepper. I'm Pat Smith, along with Landrum Roberts, Molly Robinson, and the coach, Coach Bill Clark. Coach, hope your summer is going well. Any fishing this week?
Yeah, got a lot this week. No, I haven't really, but I appreciate you asking.
What are they biting on the lake?
That's right.
That's where I live. You going top water, spinnerbait?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could have opened it up by asking him how many podcasts did you cheat on us with this week?
Let's
Don't
become
bring
really
that up.
an obsession.
I've been having a
with you
good
guys.
week. I've been having a good week, Pat. Let's not bring that up.
Try not to think about it.
So
Yeah.
one of the topics that we've had on our show this week, and it's been fascinating, and when you get to this time of the year, Coach, especially in Sports Talk Radio, we really love lists, like whether it's preseason lists or you think back. And there's been a lot of lists about the top 25 college football players within the last 25 years, 2000 through 2024. You being a college football fan, not who you coached, but just as a fan, who was some of the most dynamic guys that you can think back over the last 25 years, watching, coaching against, whatever the case may be, when it comes to college football?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's those guys that were changing the game with what they did. The Tebows, the Newtons, the dominant players from a defensive side. Obviously we go back. I go back and I think a lot of Miami guys, and I probably go back even to the 80s. So I don't know if that's our time. Guys changed the game and how they play. The Woodsons, when you said, man, that guy by himself changed how schemes, the dominant D lineman or the quarterback that was the dual threat, and obviously there's so many. And then I think of the ones that carried their team to success, and sometimes we see the guy and he's great and everybody around him is not very good. And you got those guys, but those guys that make their team better. And once again, there's going to be the factor of pro, but we're not looking for their pro career right now. I know we're just talking about college.
Well, and when I think dynamic, not only how they impacted their team, but a guy that you knew at any moment they got the ball or they had an opportunity, they could totally flip the script and take over a game. One I think about here locally that we can all appreciate is David Palmer.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
David Palmer, I can remember watching, whether it was sideline from Fox or TV highlights on Friday nights.
Yeah.
Who is this kid at Jackson Olin? And just watching him go from one side of the field to the other. And that continued throughout his college career.
This is going to be a good scheme story here. All right, so let's talk about this one thing that Alabama did with him. And, they weren't a very dynamic offense. No offense, Jay. Obviously they had some times in there, and a lot of it was what they were doing, when he had some times, to throw the ball and things. So no offense to those guys, but the fake reverse or the reverse to Palmer. Y'all remember that?
Oh, yeah.
That was a staple before there was all the motions and the tricks, and that's why I said when tricks become part of your offense, they're not tricks anymore. Think about this. And I had a group of high school coaches come and want to spend time with me. And, I've told you about TDP, Total Defensive Program I had 150 guys. Well, I ended up with 2 different groups this week saying, hey, I saw that TDP, I want to talk some defense. So anyway, I've had some high school guys, and I'm talking about pursuit. Okay, what is pursuit, right? Pursuit is running to the football, but in the right way. What does that mean? So everybody has got a position that they're going to hit. You remember we talked about pursuit drill before. So let's think about there's 2 elements of contain that come from the secondary. Okay, there's an element of contain. There's the first contain, right, that comes from if it's a corner contain that's sitting out there out of a cover 2, right, or a safety contain, some kind of quarters. There's a force player that is the first player. It could be a defensive end, could be an outside linebacker, and I say that guy's going to hit the ball face up. Okay, he's going to go hit the ball face up. These other 2 elements. So if I'm a cover 2 safety, right, everybody understands I'm the deep safety. The corner has got a pass responsibility, but he will come up to the outside contain. So he's going to keep the ball on his inside shoulder. The safety has got to stay what first? Deep, right? So if there was a sweep pass, who's got to play the sweep pass? The safety. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. If it was quarters, the safety's that guy, and the corner's deep. Okay, you get where I'm coming from. So we got to contain a first contain. Let's say it's the corner and cover 2. The safety is the second. They're keeping inside. Everybody else is running inside out. Who's got the reverse? Here comes this defensive end down the line, and he hears reverse. He needs to sprint to the goalpost to make this reverse bubble. They hear reverse in their head. It's zone. If it's man, they would chase the reverse. It's zone. So here comes a guy, shuffle, cut back, safety deep. Now, here's what I'm getting at. You would watch this. There would be 5 guys waiting on David Palmer on the backside, and it was a fake. What did you just do? You cut the pursuit down with one guy. Now, I could sit here and talk about pursuit drill. When I first saw it from Miami, Dave Wannstedt, I'd never seen the pursuit drill. How could I take this drill, teach guys how to run to the football the proper way? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Who's the contain? Who's the first contain? Who's this? We're in this coverage, we're in this front. But there was a guy, and I know I got off subject, but there was a guy that changed the way defenses were doing everything by himself. And I think that's the guys to these lists that we're talking about.
And what was so amazing about that time with David Palmer at Alabama, and for a lot of our listeners, if you don't remember that time back, Alabama was really 3 yards in a cloud of dust when it comes to offense. They would have 2 tight ends, maybe 2 wide receivers, you know, and then it was a running game. But when David Palmer came in there, whether it was, Mal Moore was the offensive coordinator, you had Homer Smith to come in there. Charlie Stubbs came in there a little bit later under Mike Dubose, but this was not a very dynamic offense. Right. But like you said, Coach, being able to take that type of talent and develop that type of schemes. Listen, if it wasn't for David Palmer, one, they wouldn't have won the national championship in 1992. I know all the defense.
Sure.
But he single-handedly, especially against La Tech at Legion Field, he ran back a punt return. That was like a 13-0 game that Alabama beat La Tech. They almost lost that game. And if you remember back in 1993, when the Alabama offense under Jay Barker was sputtering, who'd they put at quarterback? They put David Palmer there. To run the Wildcat. He single-handedly, they were going to lose to Tennessee for the first time in a long time at Legion Field. They benched Barker, put Palmer in, and he ran the offense all the way down the field, scored the game-winning the touchdown, but then they went for 2 to tie it. And in 1993, Alabama tied Tennessee as opposed to winning it.
Right.
But that's what kind of dynamic player David Palmer was, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're looking for here in this list. Who are the people that changed the game? I know, for example, Carter, our nose guard that was at Georgia.
Oh, yeah.
Who now, that's the kind of guy that just...
He wasn't on any of the list, was he?
No.
Good Lord.
Not many defensive guys even made the list.
No.
Yeah, and to me, it should be balanced. It should, now, granted, it's about the players, but just like dominant linemen, dominant skill, dominant defensive players. That's why I like a balanced, as much balance as we can, because it takes all these guys. And there's dominant guys. I just use that guy as a guy that changes the game. Give me that. I remember we had Anthony Rush, we had Garrett Marino. You start getting those dominant front guys. And we talked about this last week with Georgia as I was at Georgia. All right, what's a D lineman worth? How many D linemen do we need versus a dominant running back? What's the, and what's the position that those dominant players? Anyway, I get off.
But it's those dynamic players, Coach. To your point, is you're preparing scheme wise as a defensive coordinator. And there's so many different ways. You say, well, we have to limit how many times this guy can touch the ball.
Right.
Then you started seeing the Wildcat, and then you started seeing more of the multi-dimensional quarterback. In most cases, that they're going to get the ball every single play, and you never know what was going to happen. But how many of those dynamic players, as you're preparing, you have to balance? All right, we still have to be us, right?
Yep.
We can't make it all about number 2 on the other side of the field, but we also know that number 2 on the other side of the field, I know he's got 10 other guys helping him, could single-handedly beat us.
Well, let's talk about Julio Jones.
Yeah.
Who I had to go against 2 years in a row. The good news where he was at the first year, we played press. We played a lot of things, and I've talked to you about the history of press coverage, and we were one of the first playing press coverage in the state, one of the few. And we could press him and we could get over the top of him at receiver. The next year they started trying to move him. Slot, tailback. And that's what you do. How can I move this guy around? And we knew exactly where he was at all times. But you weaken something else when you got that guy, when you have to defend him. And I think that's what happened. The change to everything was when the quarterback, and remember I told it, I've talked all the time, all this defensive, all these clinics and all these people, and I'm talking to college coaches. We were seeing this in high school. And remember I said, can he run it? Okay, we can stop that. He can throw it. Okay, we can stop that. He can run it and he can throw it, and it's not giveaways. And what is happening now where they finally figured out, now you've got the injury factor, You got the injury factor of how much you run the quarterback and what, but there's so much. Oh, he can throw it. And that's what I was trying to explain to those college guys. Wait a second, this guy can really throw it, and he runs like a running back. Mm-hmm. And that's when you start defensively. You're dealing with 12 people, and as we talk about the Cam Newtons and the Tim Tebows and those guys, all those quarterbacks that are dual threat guys. That's the scare.
What made Tim Tebow in particular so dynamic?
I think he is the physical and the emotional leadership, love of the game, and an offense that understood how to use him. You've got a massive running back at quarterback who throws it good enough that you got to go defend. And Urban, remember I told the story. We were doing spread. Nobody was doing spread in college. Franklin, Hal Mumme. Franklin, we knew Tony Franklin, but it was Hal Mumme. He got that from Lavelle Edwards, took that whole offense and put it in the gun. But there was no run game. They ran the ball a little bit. There was zero quarterback run. Here comes Urban Meyer and starts running zone read out of the gun. And there was other guys, Tony DeMayo, and I can go through some of these guys. And then you said, wait a second, I already know this spread offense. And, this was a high school thing. We understood it because Mumme and Kentucky. What if we could take this zone read run game? Oh, now we're cheating because they're in the gun. I mean, we all remember the Dallas Cowboys when they'd go 2 minutes, and you're like, why aren't they doing that all the time? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, why not just get in the shotgun?
Yeah.
All the time. They'd just go beat my Atlanta Falcons. Even though I was a Cowboys fan, I was a bigger Falcons fan. They beat them. 2 minutes. How many times they do it? But when we added the zone read, all of a sudden here comes motion. Here comes speed sweeps. An option out of the gun. Oh, and we still got system throws.
Yeah,
it's cheating.
And Tim Tebow, back to your point though, a running back playing quarterback. I think the closest thing we've had, minus and I don't know, he can probably let it rip, but minus the offense he was in was the Army quarterback from this past year. Just punish people.
Yeah. I think what you had with him, he could throw it good enough. He could throw it good enough. Now he had Harvin and. Or Hernandez, crazy, but they had weapons that you couldn't just load up on him. Of course, that's why they were dominant. But to me, he was that good, just like I felt like with Cam Newton.
For those out there looking for the best banking experience, great financial institution coach, fine sponsor of this program is SmartBank.
Yeah, talk about Lee Smith, president, Robert Moore, vice president, all the folks at SmartBank, and I'm really every day I'm hearing a little bit more about SmartBank and just as we always say, small town feel. They're going to know who you are with all the amenities of a big bank.
All right, Coach, we're talking about dynamic players, and you brought his name up, Julio Jones. If you think back to your days in Prattville, outside the ones that you coached, because you had some really good ones there at Prattville, but some of the guys that you went up against in high school that you just saw and you just knew that they were destined to have a really good next-level career, in whether it was college or, heck, even to the pros like Julio.
That is a good question. You just immediately hit me without all right, who are those guys that stood? He was always the guy that I used as Julio rules. Who is the guy on the other team that we have to craft offensively, defensively around? And we did see a lot of guys, I think, that probably ended up going on. He was the one that he just stood out as the man child.
Just the freak athlete.
Just 6'4", 220 pounds and runs whatever. Of course, we end up finding he runs 4.4. I mean, he was one of the most dominant players that I have, maybe the most dominant player I had seen at that time that you knew was going to play. I mean, there's a Hall of Famer right there, and you knew it.
Yeah.
I don't know, how many guys I saw that were just destined for greatness like him. He was the one that probably stood out the most to me through the years. Saw a lot of good players, a lot of Alabama, Auburn guys that ended up at other places, but he's the one probably that stood out the most to me. Just you knew from the get-go who he was, and we had built the whole plan around him.
A guy that was not on that list, but he was impactful in 2010 for Auburn, Nick Fairley.
Yeah, Nick played for me in the All-Star game. It was funny. He had been, if I remember correctly, he had been on both sides of the ball, and we ended up moving him. Because he ended up being a defensive player, and we moved him for that game. I think he'd played both ways, and if I'm not mistaken, we had a really good team that year, and he was one you knew was going to be good, but you didn't really know how good. Now Rolando McClain, who I did not play against, but play for me in the Alabama-Mississippi game, was in the Julio world of, this is probably the biggest freak I've ever seen. 6'5", 250 pounds, ran like a deer, had a mean streak, intelligent. You weren't supposed to rush the punter except with 5 guys. So, we line him up on the line, he blocks the punt. And we don't even have a rush on, but just unbelievable. And that big, that fast, he stands out.
I know I'm asking you a lot of questions about high school, but it's so fascinating because where you were, especially with your dad being a successful coach, successful coach at Prattville, then you went on to the college game as a successful coach. But thinking back to when you were in high school, the relationships that you had with the head coaches around the Southeastern Conference, the guys that wanted to come in and have these conversations with you because you were obviously the gatekeeper to these players that you coached on Friday night. How was those relationships? Any that you recall that maybe didn't go that well, or guys that you just really didn't care to see ever again in your office?
That to me, this is really a good question because it molded me and how I recruited. How did they treat me? And I always tell the Nick Saban story. We had met at a speaking time one time, but when he gets to LSU, I knew Muschamp. And I told this story a few weeks ago, Kyle Tatum, 6'7", 250 pounds, 60 pounds, runs sub 4'8". Well, who's not going to come see him? And I was playing him on defense with a little offense. We weren't sharing players both ways. But quickly people think this is NFL left tackle. I've got everybody in America coming in. And this is really going into my 3rd year at Prattville. Knew a lot of these guys. Obviously, I'd known Coach Andrews. Him and Dad were in the A club together. A lot of those coaches I'd known for years. Bob Stoops, I'd go work camp. And that's what I did. I would go and learn, just sit in. Let me sit in your room. There wasn't as many clinics, and they didn't just give away. There was no let's go look at this on YouTube or social media. None of that. And now, if you want to go in there and look, they would let you, especially if I brought players to camp, right? So that's what I did for years and years and years. Those guys that came in, and I'm talking about Bill Walsh, had his brief little stint in college. Stoops, I saw them all. I thought, and I always talk about Coach Saban because he was so good with the high school coach. I still remember me and him sitting there for 3 hours, first time, and talking ball and talking. I told you a story. That was the first time he said, Coach Tuberville said, I need to go get a lake house. I was like, what do you think about that? I said, I think that could be pretty good, But obviously, Tommy Tuberville, long-time relationship with him when he was at Ole Miss, went and visited him when he was there. I went to Miami when he was at Miami just to learn, and he had just come from being a 6-7 year GA to a position coach, talking about paying your dues. So, but I think just to put it in a synopsis, the guys that really understood how important the head coach was, especially at that time, the relationship that was developed, especially with those guys that you knew were going to have players every year, and that's, for example, one of the things we did every year, we would have a chalk talk every Wednesday in February that any local coach could come, pay $5, and we'd have pizza there, and we'd have 2 hours, sit in the room, quarterback coach. I'm in my office. Anybody wants to come see me? So guys that wanted to set up a visit, obviously we did a lot of that, but I wanted to have a time where any local coach could come in there and talk ball and talk, because what that set up was, Pat, you've come in to see me and you got my number now. Hey, tell me about how you're playing press. Well, that's a true relationship, and that's what I wanted, especially in the state of Alabama. I'm a high school coach. So I think one of the things I always took a lot of pride in is that we were involved with the coaches. We knew who they were. They knew who we were. There was constant feedback. So when I'd say, look, I love all my guys. This guy is going to struggle with college work. I mean, I hate it. He struggles with high school work. Now he'll have a chance to go to junior college or whatever.
You're talking about from an academic standpoint.
Academics, I didn't have discipline issues, because we were set up to be a college. We practiced first block, and then we came back after school and did other things, and we fed them, and however we had to do it. Like I said, cookie dough to buy biscuits or whatever it was, but we had set them up for success to go to the next level. But the understanding of who that guy was and what his strengths and weaknesses were, that comes from the coach and that relationship.
From the college level, recruiting.
Yeah.
we see a lot of talent here in the state. We're talent rich, but it's different classifications. And this kid might have just tore it up, set records in 3A, 2A. I think about a guy like Mac Campbell, a running back who just tore it up. And there's so many others like him. How do you differentiate? How do you know this translates to this level?
Great question. I think dominance is dominance. Dominance is dominance. And then some of the measurables come in there on size and speed. The guy's a running back and he's running 4.8. He's still a good player and he's still dominant. Now, is he 6'2", 220? Does that translate to another position? So that's where you've got to understand, who is he going against? How dominant is he? Come to camp. Let me see you in camp. Let me let you compete against some of these other. And that's why it was so big. We sent emails out to everybody. Our camps were legendary. We'd have 600 and 700 kids.
Wow.
Truly, 600 and 700 kids at each camp. Bring your guys to me. They're not going to get hurt. It's cheap. We're going to run 140. Well, I'll run 140. That's not what you're there for. Now I get to see it. And if you're a true prospect, we got a laser over there. As long as I make sure you're worst thing happen, you go tear a hamstring.
Right.
I'm not going to send you your player back injured. I was that guy. If you let them come, it's 2 hours. We're not going to let them get hurt. They're going to learn something. I'm going to treat them like they're my own. And I'd lay there and say, let me tell you something. What you're doing as a football player is important. Don't let somebody tell you it's not important. Don't let somebody tell you that what you're doing, it's not more important, though, than being a good person. It's just not.
Right.
It's not more important than getting your grades. But it is important. And what you're doing, there a lot of people cannot do. Yeah. So feel good about what you're doing. Now, guys, it's going to get 100 degrees here in a few weeks. We're not hearing about anybody quitting. Those were the things that I hoped a high school coach would go, man, my guys and coach treat us like we were. I'm going to shake every hand that I can shake. That's what I thought I wanted, because that's what I wanted my guys to get, learn, have a chance, get seen. And, it used to drive me crazy, and I got some of it, but they only wanted to talk to the stars there. Well, we're going to have time for that. Those guys knew, hey, y'all get there a little bit early. We're going to give you a tour. But when we were on the field, I'm trying to coach everybody.
Right.
And I think people understood that, they appreciated it. And then the guys that knew that we were recruiting, they'd stay extra. They'd come early. Yeah. We still had a job to do. And we had to, but I wanted guys, because every kid that came to that camp wanted to be seen. That's why they came to camp.
Yeah.
So I think that was something I take a lot of pride in.
One thing you take a lot of pride in is that Tahoe that you drive from Donahue Chevrolet.
In fact, I talked to Chris Donahue about maybe it's time to get a new one. He really said, I've really been proud of. I've noticed how clean you keep it. I think he's really,
do we really believe that?
He really did say that.
Mother Nature, right?
And how good a job I do recognizing them on the show. And
you do.
Well, you do that.
And he did say that.
I don't know about the washing the vehicle.
Well, that's
who washes your car?
Well, he can't because he's doing all these other podcasts.
Exactly.
It gets washed. That's all
okay. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
You didn't hear that, did you?
Yeah.
It's all the other podcasts he does. He doesn't have.
I heard you. I was ignoring you.
Oh, okay. All right. Speaking of the relationship with coaches, not going to ask you to comment on Brian Harsin and his lack of a relationship with high school coaches. But was there ever a time when a coach would come into your office that he was so pretentious that you were just like, you know what? I'm going to do the right thing and I'm going to help this individual that he's here to watch or to discuss, but I could care less if he ever comes back in my office again.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There was arrogance. I think really, especially
did that happen a lot, or is it
not a lot?
Okay.
No, I think guys knew. It was funny more for me when we didn't, you didn't have as many players.
I guess I should have asked, did anybody try to big time you because they were a college head coach and you were a
come into your office, put their feet on your desk?
I think I didn't see that. I did see some guys tell me some things about players that I didn't like. For example, I had a guy who ended up starting basically 4 years at Alabama, and I had a coach come in there and tell me he was skinny. He was 6. This is when we were good. 6'6", 245, and he hang clean 350 pounds.
Hey.
And could run. And he said, well, he's skinny. I'm like, well, I don't have a nutrition center. But he's going to play, and he'll play on Sundays, and he did. It was an ignorant statement. Mine was more the times early on when we didn't have as many players. And, and the good recruiters came by, saw you, treated you good, and then all of a sudden when you got a player, you know, and I think you would see the really good. Once again, these were so many good things I could use. I said, let me tell you what, this is what we don't do. This is what we do. It is about relationships. And I think one of the reasons we recruited always so well at UAB was because of relationships and understand and using some guys like that to go, let me tell you what you better not do.
That's fascinating though. So almost from a salesperson's perspective, you've got a client, maybe they don't have a whole lot going on, but you know that they've been a client. You're still going to go by and see and keep that relationship up.
I remember Tommy Bowden coming by. First, he tells the story about how his dad's ready to take the Alabama job, and they decide they're going to interview him. If we remember that story. Tommy Bowden, we're at Asheville. Dad takes the job. He'd been out of coaching. He gets back in because a guy named Ken Logan was his O-line coach. Probably not a place that you would go at that time. You know, they weren't even lifting weights. But he's built a new stadium, da-da-da. So here's Reagan Clark, who'd won a lot of games. Here comes Tommy Bowden. He's like, Coach, no, you don't have a lot of players right now, but you're going to. And I know who you are. And I said, that's what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know, he knew this guy's going to have players down the road. He's had players before, and it's the right thing to do. And that's how we wanted to treat everybody. Just like I said about camp, how we treated each kid was so important to me, and I think that's how you recruit.
Did you ever have a player get injured at camp?
I had a few get a hamstring, and I was just, and I would say, let me tell you something. I want you to go. Do not come back injured. And they'd be like, what does that mean? I said, you know what that means? That means you better be warmed up. And and this is what I would hear so many times, and really it wouldn't hardly ever happen to me, but I can tell you guys, especially really fast guys. Now think about this. He runs a 4.3. They won't see it again. They won't see it again. And by the fourth one, he pulls a hamstring that he deals with the whole year. That's malpractice.
Yeah.
Right. What else do you need to know? He's fast. I mean, does he need to run a 4.28 or a 4.31? And I'd be like, and the kids would want to run more because they could really run. I'm like, you're fast. I got it. And the big thing, dude, I don't want you to get hurt because your coach is going to be mad at me just like I would have been mad.
Yeah.
Because I've got to play with you. And I think that relationship's why we had so many. And most people do it right. They really do. But things like that were just like, now granted, a guy could go up for a ball in 707 and fall. That's nobody's fault. That's the things we don't want. I would just kind of be on edge about, if I talk to all the kids out here, are they getting treated right? And did we come away with no injuries? Because then it was a successful camp.
K9 Global Protection Group, a fine Alabama-based company. Landrum had an opportunity to see them in action over at the Atlanta Braves Truist Stadium a couple weeks ago.
I thought Gage, that was him, right? Landrum,
Yeah,
you got
that
to know
was
him real
Gage.
personal because
Yeah.
he had
Beautiful
Landrum
dog.
pinned up against the wall.
Sniffing my pockets.
Yeah, we don't know what Landrum had in his pockets,
No.
but we appreciate the guys, veteran-owned, Braves, Falcons, airports. They do a great job and keep us safe.
It needs to sniff out some more wins. Come on, Braves.
I like that.
Coach, we just have about another minute or so. I know it's a very busy time for Coach Safely, and you guys are staying busy. And we're going to have some big news upcoming, maybe in the next week or two, about a special event later this summer.
Yeah, we're pushing the envelope here. I think I can go ahead and say, should I release the name of our speakers yet?
Absolutely.
I
Go
think
ahead.
so. So we got
Save it for the other podcast that you do.
okay. Landrum, you're
No,
fired.
give us something here.
Tommy Tuberville, Paul Feinbaum. I think I'll be up on stage. You guys will be there. End of August. We're waiting on a date from Coach Tuberville because he's got his schedule. They're putting together for his bid for governor, but I think it should be a really fun night. We had Lou Holtz and Paul Feinbaum at the last one.
That was incredible.
Was really great.
It was
and
fun.
and I think this is going to be, hopefully as good or better on the next thing. But talking about Coach Safely, our course, we got a big revamp with the
app.
what you're going to see with app coming.
Mm-hmm.
Just a lot of great things, but this will kick off the messaging for the new Coach Safely, so they will play.
All the questions I would have for Coach Tuberville have nothing to do with football.
It all has to do with what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah,
I'm sure he'll be able to answer a lot of things.
that'd be great.
Oh, yeah.
I know Paul will do a great job with
Who?
that. Yeah, this guy named Paul Feinbaum. I know you don't know him, but
Oh, he used to write for the paper.
Yes, Birmingham Post Herald.
that guy.
I used to read his articles back in the day.
Yep.
Yeah, before I'd go into school. Yeah. Good times.
You did read.
I did. Didn't do very good in math, but I could read.
Good.
That's for sure. All right, Coach. Buffalo Rock, Dr. Pepper, Jimmy Lee.
Yep.
Great American, great member of this community, fine sponsor, title sponsor of this show each and every week.
He is also a board member with Coach Safely, but appreciate Buffalo Rock. Just Jimmy Lee and those guys, what they do for the whole community, especially for us and Dr. Pepper.
For all of us here at the Bill Clark Show, have a wonderful 4th of July holiday. We'll be back very soon with another edition of the Coach Bill Clark Show presented by Dr. Pepper, Buffalo Rock.
This has been the Bill Clark Show, presented by Dr. Pepper.